Hi everyone, I'm Bill Holcomb, and thanks for joining me as we tackle this easy blue heron watercolor painting. This is perfect for beginners. I start with some clear water using my number 12 brush around the sun. That has been very lightly penciled in using a coin. Then I go into the Windsor yellow all the way around, and I'm purposefully painting in that circular motion. And I bring that down into the water area, and then we go into the alizarin crimson, and we can let them fuse at the edges, the yellow and the crimson. And do have a piece of tissue to hand, because if you have too much on your brush, an excess, you can easily remove some, wipe some off, damp it off with tissue. So we're building up an underpainting situation, and I'm using dry brush with tissue there to mop up the edges. Always remember to do that to avoid creep back. Then, whilst it's wet, lots of wetting wet going on here, still on the number 12 brush, go into the Windsor blue and work your way in from the edges. And purposefully leave some gaps here and there so we've got the yellow and the crimson coming through. Being careful not to get too close to the sun. As you can see, I'm leaving those little gaps here and there. And now I'm just strengthening up the yellow around the sun. You can achieve this because it's still wet, so lots of wet and wet. That was with a number 4 or number 6 brush will do, whichever you have. Then in the water area, we got the blue at the edges, and then just bringing it across a little bit, but very lightly. Then we go into the mixture of the Windsor blue and the alizarin crimson. This is a nice, easy painting for beginners. It enables you to practice wet and wet washes, and not much detail. The most detail is the bird, but very easily drawn in, almost a silhouette. So nothing to be too concerned about there in terms of detail. Mopping up the edges again, as you will see. Now, remember, in the immediate foreground, it's always much darker. So I've got that Windsor blue and alizarin crimson mixture at the very bottom. And then I work up the painting, but the mixture gets fainter as I work up. And here is a kneadable eraser that I'm using around the pencil marks for the sun, and making sure that the paper is totally dry with hair dryer. I then do some lifting around the sun. Now for these reeds, I've got a mixture of light red and Windsor blue. And when you paint these, you could at this stage twist the paper around to make life a little bit easier for you, as I've done, because it's not like you're doing a wet and wet wash where you need the pigment to slowly creep down the paper. So you can twist it round if it's easier for you. And you will see as this progresses that I purposefully made those reed areas crossing over each other, smaller stems at the bottom, etc., with some of the foliage, whatever, coming through here and there. And I can use something like a number 4 and number 6 brush for the stems, and then if necessary, you could drop to a number 2 brush for the detail, which I'm laying in now. Then I'm going to do the other side, but I will be adding much more to those reed areas, which you'll see as we progress. I'm choosing not to go over the sun area on this occasion. On rare occasions, it will happen on purpose, um, to show a little bit of contrast and interest between the light and the dark, but I don't think we need it for this painting because we have the interest with respect to the blue heron when that's painted in later, very much, as I mentioned, on a silhouette basis. And now I'm making sure that various stems here of the reeds do cross over each other. We see lots of blue herons at places like St. Mark's and Watercolor here in Florida. And so I'm always inspired by seeing the wildlife there at places like St. Mark's. So this would be typical of that area. And I'm dropping in those various leafy areas at the tops and so forth, and here and there closer towards the bottom where it meets the water to show as much interest as possible. And you'll see that when we put the various reflections in, we don't meticulously follow every single pattern. We just do enough to tell a story. I use the bottom of each stem as a rough guide. For the blue heron, we've got the orange type beak, and then an underpainting of blue, the wings are blue, and a very distinctive shape with the neck of the bird. And this one must be in mating season because all his feathers are roughed up here and there, which you'll see later, but we'll emphasize once the underpainting is dried enough. Okay, so we're dropping in whilst it's wet some of the mixture of wings of blue and alizarin crimson, still using a very small brush. The legs, we've got a very dark color. I don't like to use black straight from the tube. If I want a black or something very close to a black, I'll mix it from the three primary colors. And here we go with a little bit of that scruffy type plumage coming out here and there. As I mentioned, this will be nice and easy. And do remember to have your board at an angle. It slopes from the top to the bottom. I have a block of wood at the top under my board. It'll give me something like a 25-30 degree angle sloping down. That way, when you do wet in wet washes, they slowly creep down the paper. They have somewhere to go. If it's totally flat, they have nowhere to go, and they puddle, and then they dry in some areas and stay wet in others, and you get creep back and so forth. It's a problem. So always have it at an angle sloping from top to bottom. And here we go with those various reflections. We do need to do the reed reflections first before we do the various shadows and ripples in the water. And of course, those of the blue heron, which we'll do first. We'll do the blue heron uh, shadows and reflections first before we do the various ripples across the surface of the water. This, as I say, nice and easy to do. You can play around with it. You don't need to meticulously do those reflections. Just generally, it will be convincing enough. And do remember that some cross over each other here and there makes it far more interesting than being all in one line with equal distance, almost regimental. And here we go. I'm using the quarter size flat brush first of all. We've got a mixture of the Windsor blue and the alizarin crimson. And do remember that these ripples in the distance will, of course, be much thinner. So I'm laying down a few first, and then um, not too many, because I'll then do the ones from the bird, as we're doing now, before I go over that area where the reflection and shadows of the bird are located. You can use a flat brush again here, or you can use to your very small number 2 brush. It's up to you. And do remember that these brushes in different makes, they come up different sizes. I do say which number size I'm using, but you'll find they vary so much between one make and another. And here I'm using the half size flat brush for the much thicker ripples on the water closer to me. And if I use that for the distance, then I'll very, very lightly touch the paper, almost using it like a thin chisel, and then I can still achieve those fine lines. And here we are, we have a finished painting. I hope you enjoy that. Please tackle it. I know you can achieve it, and I look forward to seeing you next time. If you enjoyed this tutorial, give my other beginner videos a try by clicking this thumbnail.